Volume 1. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The sun sat in the west and gently shrouded the old and ruined village of Shenmigu in darkness. Suddenly, the rapid pounding of a gong broke the evening's tranquility, making the villagers who were preparing their dinner run out their doors and rush to the village entrance. Something happened, something big must have happened. Is someone's wife dead? Did someone go into the mountains to hunt wild boars with a bow? Or could it be that government officials came to conscript men from the village? The villagers, overcome by a restless and anxious atmosphere, went to the village's entrance, where they found, under a locust tree that had been dead for many years, a man with a tied-up pretty woman. I saw her ragged clothes, messy hair, and panic-stricken paper-pale face. She speaks, but in unintelligible words. All of a sudden, the crowd erupted in an uproar. Isn't that the woman the Li family's Dalong bought a couple of days ago? How did she end up like that? Someone who quickly recognized the tied-up woman shouted. Don't you know? This lady went outside and secretly ran away last night. At last, she was caught by someone in the neighboring village. Ha, this woman is courting death. Who said she wasn't? We are all poor here. Since you came here you have to accept your own fate. I mean, could she really successfully run away? The girl that Wu San bought last year. She also escaped in the middle of the night and was also captured and brought back. As soon as she entered the village she was beaten to death by the Wu brothers. Such a young woman, to be beaten to death. Spoiling such a good face in vain. Look at that flawless skin. Li Man looked at the dense crowd, full of unspeakable fear, but she could not figure out the situation she was now in. Wasn't she killed by a car? How can she be tied up here? Who are these people pointing at her? She desperately shouted for help, asking the villagers to untie her. However, nobody understood what she said. And so, they continued to crowd around her, speaking words she couldn't understand. She didn't get what they were saying, but, judging from their tone and expressions, it surely wasn't words of praise. Hey, look, the woman woke up, she's really pretty, yeah. Such uselessness is unimportant. Any woman who dares to leave my Shenmigu village have only one way to escape, death. Suddenly, a warty and fat woman grabbed rotten vegetables from a basket that she was going to use to feed the pigs, and smashed them on Li Man's face. It was terrible. The other village women followed suit. They spat on Li Man and picked up small stones to throw at her. There were even two bold women who simply walked up to her and maliciously pinched her skin. Stop. Go away. Who are you guys? Let me go right now, cried Li Man, her body's pain far lesser than the fear in her heart. This was a group of uncivilized villagers. Their clothing was ancient. They look a lot like the people from ancient times in the historical dramas she's seen. At this time, an old man came over. He had a bit of dignity in his countenance and drove away several women. What's happening over here? Get out of the way. Chief, we too are unbearably angry. Such a woman deserves a lesson. Right, should we hang her or should we sink her in the pond? Several women gathered around the village chief and asked in high spirits. The village chief grumpily looked at the several women. Present all of you, leave at once. This matter regards the Li household and should be handled by them. He then turned his head to ask the brawny man behind him, Wu San, what about Li Morin? You were ordered to go call him. How come half a day later I don't see even the trace of his shadow? Wu San smiled cheekily while his eyes lewdly stared at Li Man. A few of the Li brothers went to the mountains to look for this woman. They left the youngest alone at home, so I left a message with him. They'll come over as soon as they return. The village chief frowned and looked at the sky. It was getting dark. He once again turned his face to look at Li Man. His face was filled with contempt. From the women's attitude just now, Li Man estimated that this old man must be the village chief. She hurriedly shouted, Uncle, please let me go. Let's talk a little, okay? I don't know how I have offended you, but as long as you let me go, we can discuss it properly. I can give you money as compensation. What is she mumbling? The village chief turned his head in disgust and asked Wu San. Wu San also couldn't understand it and only shook his head. Who knows what this woman is saying? Don't listen to her. Li Man was desperate. No one would listen to her. Even the old man who called the shots was the same. What should she do? What were they going to do? Set her on fire? If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Quick notes. Dalang, eldest son equals Li Mo. Erlang, second son equals Li Yan. Sanlang, third son equals Li Shu. Dage, elder brother. The evening mountain breeze was particularly cold. Li Man shuddered while desperately trying to think of something to say. The village chief, seated under the tree, saw that the Li family was taking too long to show up. The crowd's lingering whispers to hang Li Man were getting louder and louder. After having 2 smokes, he got up and said, Wu San, according to what the others said, hang this woman and, when night falls, bury her in the mountains. He looked at her with evilness flashing in his eyes. Yes. Wu San was looking forward to this. At once, he took out the hemp rope on his waist and walked towards Li Man. When Wu San went to drag her over, to everyone's surprise, she tried to not appear afraid and added some words that people couldn't make any sense of. What are you going to do? All of Li Man's hair stood on end. This man looked wretched and vicious, totally not a good person. Wu San didn't understand her words, but he understood the look on her face. He only thought of how this young beauty seemed even more alluring when scared. It's a pity to just hang her like this, but using some martial arts, he could press some acupoints to fake her death and then, taking advantage of when no one's around, he could bring her back to life again. This little lady might just become his. Li Man saw the malicious intent in his eyes and shouted, "Go away! Don't touch me!" Loud cheering arose within the crowd. Hang her! Hang the wench! Wu San was very straightforward. He skillfully put the rope around Li Man's neck and used both his hands to exert all his strength. Li Man felt her breathing constrict and the extremely painful sensation brought by the gruff of the tightly strapped rope around her neck. Will I die again? This is ridiculous. To die twice on the same day. Wasn't the car accident enough? Do I really need to go through this again? Stop! A resounding voice passed over the crowd, just as Li Man was to be hung by the anticipating villagers. A tall, sturdy man rushed straight to the locust tree. He took hold of Wu San and immediately overturned him. The 2 young men behind him followed by kicking and punching the fallen Wu San. The villagers were confused. The village chief hastily stepped forward. Erlang, Sanlang, what the hell? Calm down. Stop fighting. Commanded Li Mo, the eldest, after taking down the rope around Li Man's neck and watching her faintly wake. Li Yan and Li Shu stopped. However, Wu San started to roll on the ground, wailing like a ghost and howling like the wolves, making an exaggerated scene. Chief! You have to take responsibility for this. These brothers are bullies. They just came and beat me up like that. How can you permit this? You were the one asking for a beating. Li Shu couldn't help but fiercely kick Wu San's buttocks once more. This son of a wench who dared to mess with someone else's wife, you've done nothing but court death. Li Shu! The village chief was thick-skinned and brazenly shouted again to end the fight. He then shifted his sight to look at Li Mo with displeased eyes. Dalang, is that what happened? Li Mo did not answer the village chief, but neatly untied the rope tied on Li Man's body, took her into his arms and turned away. The village chief had a very ugly expression on his face and moved to block his path. Just then, the Li family's second son, Li Yan, stated this was all caused by that bastard, Wu San. The village chief was left in an embarrassing situation as the Dalon left with the woman in his arms, not giving him any face. As a way out, he turned to the Erlang and asked what the hell happened? Li Yan glanced fiercely at Wu San. As soon as he turned to confront the village chief, he noticed the villagers standing around watched them, and thus, started to make an account of what had happened. It happens that, this is the woman bought by my dage. Chief, you also know that our family's situation is not easy. It's even harder for us brothers, to bring home a wife. This time we got a wife, so we naturally, had to handle things properly. Yesterday, Dage took her and Xiao Wuzi and went up the mountain to give our deceased parents a grave and let them know about our happy occasion. Who could have imagined that Dage would carelessly let a branch pierce his foot and become unable to walk back? Xiao Wuzi couldn't carry him on his back, so he let her come back to find Li Shu and I. But she is an outsider, so, obviously, she wasn't familiar with the mountains and got lost. We looked for her day and night, then heard that she was tied up over here by Wu San, but everyone who listened, unconsciously nodded. Shanmigu village is surrounded by mountains. If you are not familiar with the surroundings, it is indeed very easy to get lost. Therefore, if the women brought here didn't have any outside help in the mountains, her escape will only evidently result in death. What happened? The village chief and many others looked towards Wu San. What did you do? Wu San finally got up from the ground, feigning innocence. I really didn't lie to you. The woman ran when she saw me. If she wanted to save them, why not take me to the ones that need saving, instead of starting to run away scared? Also, there was a parcel on her, full of silver pieces and dry food. If she wasn't running away, then what was she doing? What parcel? Asked the chief. The Li brothers stared at him. Wu San was at a loss of words. Because of his greed, he had long ago secretly stashed her parcel away. Now, he wouldn't be able to get away with it. Humph! The village chief saw him saying nothing and coldly snorted. Dalong and his brothers were finally able to buy a wife with great difficulty, and I almost let you kill her off. I'll get back at you later, get lost. Wait a minute. Li Yan coldly said. Chief, my wife is very weak. She was tied and beaten up by you lot and almost got strangled to death. I really don't know what to do about this at all. And you are going to just let things go like this? If by chance she died, us brothers would have no wife to speak of, and all those years of saved money would also have gone down the drain. Chief, as the village head, you have to properly handle this matter. To steel himself, Wu San hurriedly said, Chief, you can't put all the blame on me. Before they arrived, these stupid dogs were also onto her, trying to hang her. Furthermore, you also made a speech in support of it. Shut up! The village chief coldly commanded, completely disregarding him. Wu San, this is your fault. You and the stupid dogs pay for half of the money she cost. Ahem, I don't have any on me. Ah, Erlang, buy some tonics with the money for your wife to make up for it, okay? Li Yan nodded in reply. Li Shu looked at Wu San. I'll let you off lightly this time. Wu San was extremely depressed. For the women there who already didn't have much, to pay half the money was certainly a loss, but they didn't dare to disobey the orders of the village chief. Plus, there was also the Li family's third master, Li Shu, looking at them with red eyes. Afraid of getting beaten up by him, they resigned themselves to their bad luck and decided to withdraw from their savings and quickly slipped away. The other villagers, seeing that the show was over, sulkily dispersed. The village chief glanced at Li Yan and Li Shu and spoke in a dignified manner. Was that woman really bought by your dage? Yes. The brothers nodded. The chief did not believe, but only said, then go at once to end this matter without delay, okay? Delaying may bring more unexpected trouble. He spoke and left right away with his hands clasped behind his back. Li Yan and Li Shu looked at each other and said no more as they all hurried home. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The evening wind was overbearing. Li Man gradually calmed down from her despair. Through the darkness surrounding them, she looked at the man holding her own. He looked up at the front and could only see his fortified chin from her point of view. There is such a tight lip, but she can still feel that he is tall and burly, like a hill, a pair of arms strong and powerful. A strong male temperament wraps her, making her uneasy but not dare to shake it. But who is he? What is she to him? Why should he save her from that situation? Li Man moved her lips, wanting to ask something, but she thought back at the tree when she had said so much before, but no one understood her. She felt depressed. He sighed lightly in frustration, but Li Man still heard it. She looked down from her position over his shoulder, but she couldn't see his face. If you don't want to stay, tomorrow, I will let you go. Li Man's heart was tight and she wanted to avoid his sight, but she wasn't willing to give up the opportunity to communicate. She cautiously asked, "What did you say?" She said in pure Mandarin. Liemo squinted his eyes, blinded by doubts. What was she talking about? Big brother. At this time, a little boy ran out of the Li's small courtyard, nervously glaring at Li Man. Is she dead? No. Xiao Wu, go boil some hot water. Liemo commanded the younger brother as he carried Li Man into the West House. There was no light in the room, it was dark, but Liemo was familiar with the place, and he put Li Man down. Take a break, I will let Xiao Wu give you something to eat. Li Man couldn't understand him. Plus, she couldn't see anything. He suddenly let her go and turned to leave. Scared, she grabbed his sleeve. Don't go. Liemo obviously didn't expect her to react that way. His doubts returned, but realizing the darkness in Li Man's bright voice flashing fear and anxiety, his heart softened. Rest assured, no one will hurt you ever again. His low voice revealed traces of gentleness. Li Man felt some peace of mind, her hands gradually loosened. Liemo didn't say anything else, turned and went out. Just then, his 3 younger brothers arrived at home. Is she in the house? Li Shu, the 3rd child, shouted standing at the door and slammed his way into the house. Liemo stopped him and dragged him directly into the kitchen adjacent to the West House. Brothers, what are you doing? Big brother, don't worry, this kind of person will be honest with a serving of my fists. I have to go to the West House to beat up someone. Hey! Liemo did not stop him this time, but gloomily warned him, if you dare touch her, then I will beat you up first. Li Shu's face turned red in rage. Big brother, this woman isn't honest. You spared her, and she dared to try to escape. If you hit her, will she talk to you? Li Yan stated, glancing at his raging brother, and asked Liemo, Big brother, what should we do? Liemo looked at his younger brother Li Yan, determining what decision he should make from the bottom of his heart that, tomorrow I'll send her out of the mountains. What? Li Shu's eyes widened to the point it looked as if it might just fall out. Brother, are you really going to let her go? Li Yan squinted his eyes ever so slightly. He also seemed to not agree with this decision. Even the little brother who was boiling water showed reluctance. Liemo was very upset. In fact, not only his younger brothers, but even he himself didn't want to do this. He's 23 this year, and the 4th, youngest brother was 16. In addition to Xiao Wu, he was afraid that the 4 brothers in this courtyard needed a woman. Moreover, the woman looked good. The 2nd brother and the younger brother seemed to be very interested, and he also liked her. In the goddess ditch, because of poverty, brothers sharing a wife was a very common thing, but it was difficult to find a satisfying woman. But if the woman wasn't willing, it would be impossible to make a life together, and he didn't want his brothers to become violent and arrogant people. I will send her out of the mountain tomorrow morning. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. I will send her out of the mountain tomorrow morning. Li dropped those words as he watched the water in the pot and stirred it using a ladle, intending to draw some water. Li Shu became anxious, and grabbed the ladle from his hand. Big brother, I want a wife. Li turned his head and looked at the third brother who was a little taller than him. If he wanted to put the blame on him, he would bear it. Brothers, don't be anxious, your eldest brother is making money. After a few days, I will go through the mountains, return and everything will be alright. No, I will go instead. Li Shu said. Li Mo's face turned sour. No. Why can't I? Li Shu thought that his brother was too soft. They just got a wife using up all the money they had saved for so many years. Brothers, please. Li Yin was afraid that the younger brother would lose his temper again and make things get worse. He brought Li Shu aside and then thoughtfully said to Li, Big brother, I have an idea. Let's discuss this at a later time. You see, the fourth brother has to come back in a few days. We can wait until he comes back. Our fourth brother is a scholar, and he has a bright future. The woman will not look at us, but maybe she will see eye to eye with the fourth. Li hesitated when he thought of the fourth. When Li Yin saw his reaction, he discreetly gave the youngest, the fifth son who was boiling water on the stove, a look he understood. Xiao Wu immediately got up and ran over to hug Li Mo's arm. He pleaded. Big brother, let's keep that sister, I like her. She looks really good. She looks even better than the village's beauty. Li ruffled through Xiao Wu's hair. His heart wavered, but... Big brother, one more thing. Although you want to let her go, have you ever thought of what she should do afterwards? Will she be pulled into the market to be sold and fare well? If she goes back, she will surely be sold. So, what should we do? What should we do? Li Yin repeated. Li Mo's heart immediately tightened. He made a decision. Well, let's wait and see then, but without her own consent, not one of you can touch her. Especially third brother. I know. Li Shu's face showed a childish smile. Honestly, the eldest brother could leave the woman alone, and he wouldn't care about her one bit. Li Yin slightly smiled, while his eyes looked toward the West House. Li Man panicked. She hid behind the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Did that person just see her? She didn't deliberately eavesdrop, she didn't understand anything anyways. Xiao Wu, is the water boiling yet? In thought of the little figure who was just peeking behind the door, Li Yin asked. It's boiling. Xiao Wu replied. Take the bucket and send it to the West House. Li Yin said. He also asked for a small oil lamp and he brought it to the West House himself. An orange glimmer of light slowly came in, illuminating the whole room. Li Man nervously shrunk to a corner, her eyes vigilantly observed the strange man. He was very tall. When he came in, he had to lower his head so that it won't hit the door frame. As soon as he entered the room, he placed the oil lamp on a big cabinet. Then he turned his head and smiled at her. His smile was very nice, from the corner of his lips to the bottom of his eyes, he was very clean and pure. He has a certain charm that made people want to easily trust him. But who is he? He's not the one who carried her here. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 5. Chapter 5. Her courage seems to have grown a bit. She dares to look at me straight in the eyes? Li Yin raised his eyebrows. Without a trace, he opened a big cabinet and pulled out a clean set of clothes from inside. At this time, Li Shu came in with a small bucket of hot water. As soon as he entered the house, he put the bucket on the ground and looked straight at Li Man. Here's water for a bath. If he let others know that he gave the wife a bath, his face would stay unmovable, but in his heart, he was very happy. You're so energetic, take the tub from the East House too. Li Yin glanced at his younger brother, clearly remembering the others. Li Shu obediently ran out and brought in the large tub. When he put it down, he waved to Li Man, "Come here, take a bath." Is he asking me to take a bath? Although I don't understand him very well, I can tell as much from his actions, Li Man guessed. However, there are 2 grown men in the house. How can I wash? Seeing her not moving, with a stupid and overwhelmed look, Li Shu became impatient and rushed forward to bring Li Man. Li Yan pulled his arm away, twisted it and pushed him out the door. "Second brother, what are you doing?" Li Shu was confused. Why did he push him out? "Let's go," Li Yan told his brother. The third brother was so reckless, he would definitely scare the little woman. Li Yan did not enter the house, but stood at the door. Pointing at the bath, hot water, and clothes on the big cabinet, he gently said, "Take your time to wash, change clothes, and eat." When he finished speaking, he helped Li Man close the room's door. Next to him, Li Shu watched the gentleness and thoughtfulness his second brother showed to the little woman. He felt very wronged. He also helped by bringing the water and tub. How come he cannot do it? When the woman could no longer see them, Li Yan's smile was not so warm. He stared at the younger brother and warned, "If you dare to scare the woman away, don't think about getting a wife again." Li Man could still hear the 2 people at the door, but they would not come in again. Li Man was only a bit dismayed. The clothes on her body were dirty and broken. Some delicious food and a good wash was welcomed. Soon, the 2 brothers at her door heard the sound of splashing from inside the house. The 2 breathed until suffocation, as a hot mist seemed to spread from the room. "Third brother, go chop up some firewood, I want to cook." Li Yan quickly suppressed his emotions and told his brother, but did not expect Li Shu to shake his head, covering his nose. "What's wrong?" Li Yan asked. He saw that his younger brother was bleeding from his nose, his fingers wet with blood. He couldn't help but laugh. "The fire is still big, go wash it off with cold water." Li Shu ran to the water pot and poured water on his face. Li Mo picked up a load of water and came back. He was pouring it all into the water pot. When he saw the younger brother pouring cold water on his face, he was taken aback. "Are you mad?" "He's thinking about the wife." Li Yan came in and couldn't help but make fun of the third situation. The third brother is 18 this year. He's at that age, it's no wonder that a woman taking a bath in the house would make him react that way. Li Mo's face changed, he worriedly looked across the wall. Li Yan stated, "She's bathing." Bathing? A very ordinary word, but at the moment it made Li Mo's cold face burn. Ancient heart loss note. What would you like to see posted on the blog? Drama, TV show, anime, manga, novel, other. All of the above. Do you even check the blog? No? TSK and I cared for you. Just kidding, guys. But please do tell me what you'd like to see on the blog right here. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Li Man finished bathing and picked up the clothes they gave to her. She checked them out and was dumbfounded. They gave her man's clothes to wear? And aren't they too big? Doesn't she have her own clothes? Or is she not really a part of this family? Tap tap tap. Have you finished bathing? Dinner is almost ready. Li Yan gently knocked at the door. Li Man began to panic. With no time left to think, she quickly picked up her clothes and rushed to the door to hold her hand against the door in fear that the person outside will open it. Since he couldn't hear any movement inside, Li Yan gently tried to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. She was obviously using the door bolt to keep the door closed. If you are finished bathing, then open the door. The youngest, the fifth son, will give you dinner. After that, he laughingly turned around and left. In fact, He wanted to be the one to care for her, she was so thin. As the sound of his footsteps distanced, Li Man busily put on the clothes, disregarding what it looked like. But she looked really funny wearing it. The top of the coat was almost able to cover her twice over, and there was no waist belt. She pinched her waist, it looked awkward, her collarbone was exposed. The pants were even more outrageous, mopping along the floor. After rolling them up a few times, she finally rolled them over her ankle, but the pants were still way too big. She felt wind rushing through. This can't be fixed. She was depressed. Then someone knocked on the door again. This time it was the voice of a child. "Sister, I have some food for you." Because it was a child, Li Man didn't hesitate much. She opened the door and began to carefully examine her surroundings. Half a head shorter than her, she saw a handsome, thin boy standing at the door holding something in his hands. Seeing her open the door, he grinned and presented a bowl to her. "This is for you, sister." "Is it something to eat?" Li Man took it and said, "Thank you." The child turned around and ran. He seemed to be very shy. Li Man smiled softly. Apart from those who were at the village entrance, the family gave her a very simple feeling and seemed to care for her. A bowl of corn paste and 2 hot cobs, exuding the mellowness of corn. Li Man suddenly felt pangs of hunger and went to sit on her bed to eat. First time she ate such a whole grain, it was refreshing, so she ate it up in one breath. Her stomach was satisfied. Just how will my empty bowl be sent to the kitchen? She didn't dare to go out looking like how she did. Fortunately, Li Yan had guessed her dilemma. After calculating the time she should take to finish eating, he let Xiao Wu go get the bowl. When her bowl was taken away, Li Man finally felt relieved, but she turned around and saw the basin of bath water. That will fall to tomorrow. Li Man locked the door and immediately went to bed. It was very hard. The quilt is thin, and it had a strange smell. I don't know if it's been used for too long, or it was whitened by a single wash. Gray, the kind that can't be washed over and over, and the big patches on it makes it hard to see the original color. But there is no way. With the faint light she had, Li Man looked around the room surrounded by mottled earthen walls. The inside of the room was very empty, only the bed under her body, and a large painting against the wall. In addition to the cabinet, there was nothing else. This family is poor. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The hard bed and the smell of the bedding was distracting, but Li Man finally lied down and slept very deeply, almost without any dreams. When she woke up the next day, it was already 3 in the afternoon. There was warm sunshine beaming through the small wooden window. She sat up and looked around herself and was a little embarrassed. Her late memories fell to the hospital entrance where she bumped into her mother-in-law, who was with a young pregnant woman to do a checkup. She learned that her husband was having other women carry his children. She did not have the time to ask questions. Her mother-in-law yelled at her and threw her out, saying she was obstructing her husband's happiness, that she was a chicken that could not lay any eggs. At an intersection, she pushed Li Man into the speedy traffic by a slap. The memory of dying was so cruel. She didn't want to think about it again. She knew that she had passed away and gained a new life, so she should start anew. Li Man got out of bed, opened the big cabinet, and rummaged through it, clearly finding women's clothes. Probably the man was too careless yesterday and got it wrong. Li Man busily took out a set of women's rags and quickly changed into them. No need to mention that they fit her very well. She put the men's clothing that she wore last night on the big cabinet and went out. On a small stool at the door, Xiao Wu heard the door opening and immediately turned his head. Seeing Li Man standing at the door, he stood up and looked at her. "Sister." The yard was quiet. Li Man asked, "Are you alone?" Xiao Wu couldn't understand what she was talking about, so he just kept on grinning and grinning. Li Man also smiled helplessly, looked at the sky. It should be noon by now. Around this time, the adult should be at work, right? This was good, she could spend more time to think of ways to get along with them. She turned around and went back to the house and struggled to pick up the tub to pour the water she used the night before. Xiao Wu saw her predicament and rushed in to help. "Thank you," Li Man said with a polite voice and carried it with the help of the little guy. They poured the water in the corner of the front yard. Li Man put down the bath and took the opportunity to get acquainted with the environment. 3 earthy thatched cottages surrounded by mud and a wall. The front yard wasn't big, there's a peach tree next to the courtyard wall, full of green leaves. The backyard was much bigger. A few leeks were planted behind the house, and a small gravel road stretched from the edge of the vegetable patch to the small huts in the northwest corner. Li Man went to the vegetable garden and looked at the leeks, mainly composed of small green vegetables. The growth wasn't so good. It was dry, and insects were all over them. There were also a few beans on the vines. A few cucumbers hanging on a shelf with thick branches were probably lacking in nutrition, so they will never grow up. Although it was a small vegetable garden, it was definitely not well taken care of. Usually, the seeds were directly seeded. Xiao Wu didn't understand what this beautiful sister was looking at. He stood quietly behind her, and wherever she went, he followed. When Li Man got up, she finally found this little follower. In fact, she wasn't much taller than Xiao Wu, but she bent down and gently asked, "What's your name?" "You, can you write?" If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. Li Man asked while she picked up a branch and wrote a few lines on the sand. "My name is Li Man, what's your name?" Li Xiaowu's big dark eyes were full of worship. "Sister can write? Do you know how?" Li Man passed the branch to him, then pointed to the word on the ground, meaning that he should also write. Li Xiaowu understood her meaning, but he didn't recognize the word, and he couldn't write it. Only the 4th brother in their family had mastered that strength, and read the most books. His other brothers were not much better than himself. The older brother and the 3rd brother could write their own name, the 2nd brother was better, he could copy a book. "No?" Seeing his bitter face, Li Man had a long sigh. Li Xiaowu was a little depressed. Does the sister dislike him because he is illiterate? Sister must have abandoned all hope on him. Will she escape again? He carefully took Li Man's hand and smiled at her pleasingly. He was confident in his smile. Every time, as soon as he showed this smile, even if he did something bad, his family would forgive him. Sure enough, Li Man touched his little head and encouraged him. "Nothing, it doesn't matter if you don't know the word. I will teach you later." Li Xiaowu couldn't understand, but the beautiful sister was laughing. He knew that he had succeeded. "However, it's best to get sister to like me. 2nd brother said that if I want sister to stay, I should make her like me. Sister, come eat." He took Li Man's hand and brought her to the front yard. Li Man didn't know what he was going to do, so she followed him and was pulled all the way to the stove. There, the little guy squatted and took a bowl of porridge and 2 steamed sweet potatoes from the pot. "Sister, for you." He seemed to give Li Man all his treasure. The porridge was warm, but the sweet potato was cold. It was obviously there for a while. "Thank you." Li Man thanked. Li Xiaowu sat next to her and watched her eat. He realized that this sister was not only beautiful, but speaks nice and even as she eats, exudes beauty. Li Man saw that he had been looking at her and offered him a sweet potato. The little guy waved his hand. "I already ate." Seeing that he was so thin, Li Man felt pity, and forced the sweet potato into his hand and ate one. After breakfast, she rinsed the pot and bowl. Li Xiaowu wanted to do it, but she refused. No way would she have dinner and make a child wash her dishes. After washing the pot and bowl, Li Man thought of the broken clothes of the West house. Although it was broken, it could be worn after washing and cleaning. When she rummaged through the big cabinet, the clothes inside were not much better. It seemed that there wasn't one without a patch. Li Man took out the clothes she had worn in the house, and then thought about what she had seen last night. This family seems to be composed of men and no women. No one is washing the clothes? Let's do this. Do you have dirty clothes? Take them all out. Li Man didn't dare to enter the house without permission. She would let Li Wu go. But Li Wu couldn't understand her words, so she had no choice but to take him into the east house. The east house was bigger, obviously it was also used as a house. There was a stool in the middle with a table. It had a big cockroach on it. The place was really big to the point where 4 or 5 people could sleep in there, but as soon as you enter the house, there was a strong smell. A few pairs of sandals were scattered on the ground. 2 small lumps were suspiciously covered by the quilt. Li Man walked up to the quilt and discovered some dirty clothes stacked underneath. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Li Man thought of her college days, when she once entered the male dormitory. She was almost reliving the same scene. It seems that this family really lacks women. But who was she? A member of this family? Li Wu was a little embarrassed. Originally, these things were done by the second brother. But today, the second brother had to help with the bookkeeping, leaving him with no time to do such chores. Li Man didn't think much about it. She opened the window on the wall so that fresh air could come in and scatter the smell, and then, she picked out a few dirty clothes. Sister, let me wash them. Li Wu took the tub from the house to the yard and began drawing water from the well. Watching his small body doing such laborious work, Li Man smiled. By himself he brought it to her side. Li Man was not small. Seeing the rolling well being used for the first time, he was quite skillful. In a short while, the water in the basin was full. There was no laundry detergent in this age. Li Man had to follow the village's customs. So she used some wood ash. Fortunately, after carefully washing the clothes several times over, the clothes were excellent. Although old, they were clean. She put them to dry in the yard under the sunlight where you could smell the fragrance of grass. Li Man was very satisfied. She was fond of wearing clean clothes. After washing her own clothes, her hands were itchy. She went back to the house and took off the quilt on her bed and threw all the sheets into the basin. Today, the sun was very bright. She hung the quilt on the wall for exposure. Then she went to the east house again, and removed all the bedding and the quilts to air. She washed all the sheets. Because the bamboo poles for washing clothes were not enough, she later found a rope in the kitchen, squatted in the yard, and then dried a strip of washed sheets. After everything was done, it was almost noon. Li Man used several gestures to let Li Wu know so. At noon, they were the only 2 people at home, and no one else came back to eat with them. The 2 could just eat whatever they wanted. On the bench in the corner of the kitchen, a bag of corn flour, a small half bag of flour and a half bag of white rice were placed there with some sweet potatoes on the ground. There was nothing else to eat. When Li Man thought about it, she decided to use her methods. She went to the backyard's small vegetable garden and picked 2 cucumbers. She returned to wash them. From the beginning to the end, Li Wu was on the side, holding his hands together, looking at her with surprise and admiration. His eyes were full of admiration. This sister was great. Li Man also felt that the child was really distressed and thought that if she was not physically sick in modern times and if she had children, she should be the bigger person. And I feel a little pity for him. When Li Mo entered the household, he saw the clothes and sheets in the courtyard filled with clean clothes. He went to the kitchen door and saw a delicate and beautiful woman standing next to the pot. The woman was wearing a gray cloth with a patch and her sleeves were pulled up high, revealing a white arm. Li Mo only felt that it was too white. He wanted to remove his eyes, but his eyes were disobedient, and he wanted to look more to the point of staring. At that moment, Li Man suddenly turned her head and saw the man staring at her at the door, and he looked quite embarrassed. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. The man looked to be in his early 20s, tall and strong, and was wearing a coarse gray cloth with his sleeves and trousers rolled up, revealing his bronzed skin. Attractive eyebrows, defined facial features, silent eyes, his tight lips seemed to be watching them disapprovingly. Li Man recognized that this was the man who brought her here last night, her savior. Slightly opening his tightened lips, Li Man nodded to him and smiled, greeting him. Suddenly a big dog broke into the kitchen with a broken-necked wild pheasant in its mouth. Scared, Li Man screamed and hid behind the pot. Li Mo quickly entered the kitchen and angrily grabbed the big dog's ear to teach it a lesson. Big Hey, get out. Big Hey is his hunting partner. Fierce when fighting prey, but docile with the family and obedient. This time, he'll probably know that there is now a woman present in the family. I wanted to bring a pheasant to surprise her, but now I've scared Li Man. What a mistake to make. Sister, are you okay? Li Shu squatted next to Li Man, asking her with concern. Li Man patted her chest and nodded her head to show that she was fine. However, the man suddenly came back and she just had to occupy herself. She grabbed 2 more cucumbers from a bag and put them in the basin. She found that the man was tall and burly. So the amount of the meal she was currently making was too small. She poured out some more flour. She added a little bit more water, then another sound came from the entrance, and someone else entered the household. Big brother, are you home? Li Shu, the third child, slid 2 fish from his hand and rushed over to him. Li Mo was teaching Big Hey in the yard so that he won't be rash in the future. Li Shu thought that he wouldn't see his brother back yet, so his face had been sly. Usually hunting was all day, but today he didn't know what was going on. Never mind. He simply came back first. You're already back too? He got up and asked his younger brother, is the fish in the village today not in the ancestral hall? His voice fell. The second brother Li Yan entered the yard. Upon seeing Li Mo, he wasn't as surprised as the third. He casually greeted him, Big brother? You're home. Is him being at home so strange? Li Mo saw the playfulness in his second brother's eyes and asked, how come you are back too? Oh, I just finished up. The meal in the hall wasn't so good, so third brother, and I came back to see if there was any ready-made over here. Li Yan simply replied, Big brother also came back for lunch? Ah. Li Mo replied, I was in a hurry this morning and forgot to bring dry food with me. Li Yan raised his right eyebrow, I understand. He said as they went to the kitchen. Li Mo's honey-colored cheeks showed some red. The second brother felt annoyed. He knew that he wouldn't come all the way back if not for that woman. In the kitchen, Li Shu circled around Li Shu, wanting to see the fish he held up high in his hand. But how could Li Shu give him the 2 fish he'd already caught, washed, and burned for the woman? I'll eat this at noon. He put the fish on the chopping board, and then smiled at the woman. When he came back later on, he saw the clothes and sheets that had been washed and dried in the yard. She was also still in the kitchen. Li Shu's heart warmed up. I'll forget about letting her escape and abandon the family. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, Wife is cooking. 2 tall men suddenly squeezed into the kitchen, which originally wasn't big, and it suddenly became overcrowded. With Li Shu was troubling himself next to his third brother, Li Man was forced to squeeze herself a spot behind the pot. There was no other way for her to face the problem. When Li Yan saw this, he grabbed his 2 younger brothers and then pointed to the fish on the chopping board. He smiled and said to Li Man, it's too hard on you. Eat fish at noon? But she was going to cook noodles. Wu, you are responsible for keeping the fire burning. Li Yan told the younger brother, and then dragged the three brothers out the door. My brothers are all back with us, and I'm so grateful. Sister, I will help you keep the fire. Li Man glanced at him. In the end, did she reverse the place of this little guy, or was he in the military? For her lunch for 2 people, there were 3 more people coming from nowhere. It seems that it was now impossible to cook noodles, but the noodles were already there. If they do not eat at noon, they will be wasted. After thinking about it, Li Man decided to steam half a pot of rice. This was a good way to make some steamed buns. Once she decided on it, she began right away. She smashed the rice in 2 shallow bowls and put them in a large pot. She put some scorpions in a pot and then quickly gathered the good noodles, squeezed them and put them on the scorpions. She covered the pot with the lid and let Li Shu keep the fire. After the rice was properly filled, Li Man looked at the 2 fat squid on the cutting board. They were already cleaned up, but she washed it again anyways. Then she took out another pot, brushed it clean and called Shu, who was keeping the fire below. I will need to use this pot too to cook the fish. Li Shu looked at her finger pointing at the pot and immediately understood her meaning. He removed a very hot firewood from the current pot hole in use and threw it into the other pot's hole. Then he added some more firewood, and the potholes on both sides were burning. When the pot's bottom turned red, Li Man poured some oil. When the oil began to pop, she neatly added the 2 fish and the scent of the fish instantly diffused. Braised squid, Li Man still had a good hand for it. Although her ingredients were lacking, she still wanted to do as much as possible. Here, she and Li Shu were busy. Outside, the 3 men were also very busy. Li Mo was under the peach tree, picking up the wild pheasants that Big Hay brought back. Li Yan was chopping wood in the yard. Li Shu had disappeared. But in a short while, Li Shu ran to the front yard coming from the backyard, and made a good firewood pile for Li Yan. Second brother, there is not much firewood left in the house. We'll send it there. Put one down here. Li Yan took up the axe and looked at him. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Aren't you going to pick it up? Are you ready?" Li Shu's face was overcast, smelly to death. "Why don't you do it? Isn't it you who wanted to do things to please her? Okay, women love to be clean. Go clean up the pits, she will definitely look at you differently," Li Yan said. Li Shu didn't believe him. "The woman will have a good lunch, hee. The fat and fragrant fish was stinky to eat. The woman will be to blame." The second brother will swear, but this time, she is absolutely no good. Second brother, such a good fragrance, my stomach is growling. I want to see if the meal is good. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 12. Chapter 12. The smell of fish spread throughout the yard. Li Yan suddenly felt very hungry. He dropped his axe, and followed the scent that had already brought his younger brother towards the kitchen. Li Mo quickly put down the logs, got up and walked to the kitchen. The dog that had been sleeping on the ground, opened its eyes in an instant, and busily ran around in front of the kitchen. "You stay." Thinking of Li Man's frightened look, Li Mo did not hesitate to leave Dahe in the yard. In the kitchen, Li Man tried to ignore the 3 people squeezing in closer to the cooked fish in a well-filled large bowl. She kept her calm as Li Yan moved even closer. He smiled and took the bowl from her hand. "What a nice fragrance, let me see. You didn't burn it." Li Shu also came over. "Is that so? Let me see." Li Yan kicked the third brother. "Go get the east house table. Go on. Come on." Li Shu's complaint caused the fifth to lean closer to the pot, allowing him to see Li Man smirk. "Go on, bring some stools too." Li Man got some more space. She washed the 2 cucumbers, cut them into small pieces and placed them in a small dish. Li Mo also wanted to help her like his second brother. The small plate for the cucumber was obviously not big enough, so he took out a bowl for her from the cupboard. Li Shu brought the big table and placed it in the middle of the kitchen. He held a stool with the other hand and casually put it down. Then he ran over to get 2 more stools and placed them at the table. The food was set up and everyone sat down. Li Shu originally had a stool with Li Mo, but he was too big for the big brother. He squeezed him to the corner of the table. When he flashed, he sat on the stool of Li Man. The other 3 brothers of Li's family blinked at him for a while. Seeing everyone blinking, Li Man had to pick up the chopsticks and clip the meat on the belly of the fish to Li Shu. Come, try. Li Shu's eyes are smashed into a crescent moon before he eats it. He called, "It's delicious, it's delicious, it's 100 times better than the fish cooked by the second brother." Li Yin heard this, and silently fumed towards the kid. Whenever he had asked him to cook, he always told him that the meals he made were the best. "Oh, it's so delicious." Li Shu also exaggerated. Li Yin busily put a piece of fish in his mouth. The meat was smooth and tender, delicious, so delicious, and much better than the fish he could prepare. Li Mo bowed his head and tasted a piece. His face showed a gratifying smile. The woman was willing to make such delicious fish for them. It must be her way of saying that she would stay. Li Man saw that they enjoyed the taste of her food, and that they were very pleased. Her lingering uneasy feelings in the air were all swept away. They even ate 2 bowls of each of the rice. There was not enough rice, so the Li brothers also ate a few steamed buns. It could be said that Li Man's meal was too successful. The 2 fish and even a big pot of soup. They ate it all. Even the soup was eaten by Li Shu the fool. Li Yin dismissed his 3rd brother, and finally made eye contact with Xiao. His eyes silently told him to take Li Man to rest. Li Man was about to clean up the tableware, but Li Yin stopped her, saying that she was overworking herself. He would not allow her to clean up the tableware anyway, so she left with Xiao. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 13. Chapter 13. Li Man returned to the West House. She wanted to take a nap at noon, but her quilt was still basking in the sun. "Oh yeah, are there any needles or thread in this house?" "Forget it, I'll wait for the older brothers to leave, and then I'll go ask the little one." So Li Man didn't do anything. She didn't dare to wander around in the yard. She sat down and played with her hair. Underscore. After Li Shu brought Li Man to the West House, he returned to the kitchen. Upon returning, Li Shu patted his head and asked him up front, "What is she doing?" "Sitting." Li Shu replied, tilting his head. "Sitting?" Li Shu was puzzled. Hasn't she done anything else? For example, has she secretly inquired about any of us? Like who she thinks is the best looking in the family? Li Shu shook his head. When he left, Li Man was just sitting on her bed. "Then go find out." Li Shu encouraged his younger brother. "Li Shu." Li Mo looked sullenly at Li Shu. "Don't always make Xiao do such things. There is nothing left to ask that woman." "Big brother, she is also my wife." Li Shu was not satisfied. Li Mo rubbed Dahe's large furry black head and fed it the remaining fish bones. He listened to his brother and looked up to warn him, "Until she is willing, she is not our wife. You should not act with a crooked mind." Li Yin finished washing the bowls and chopsticks. He wiped his hands, patted Li Shu's shoulder and earnestly said, "Listen to big brother. I just want to know what she's doing." Li Shu felt wronged. "Don't you care about her?" "Well, come with me to the fish pond, let's go fishing this afternoon." Li Yin replied. Li Shu shouted, "Oh, good. Xiao, want to come with us? I'll pick a few muddy games for you." "Oh." Li Shu excitedly clapped his hands, but he shook his head in a blink of an eye. "I won't go, 3rd brother will be enough help. I'll stay home." "Why don't you come?" Didn't you like to play these past years? Li Shu was baffled. Li Yin understood where the little guy's mind was set. Forget it, let Xiaowu stay at home, he and the woman will be fine. In the end, Li Xiaowu was left at home, and the three brothers went out to work again. Li Man did not expect to fall asleep. She woke up confused. For how long was I asleep? She opened her eyes to see Li Xiaowu lying on the doorframe, cutely smiling at her. What time is it? She rubbed her eyes and asked, but she quickly remembered that the little guy couldn't understand her words. So she smiled and waved at him. Come closer. Li Xiaowu's delicate thin face was handsome but unnaturally pale. Through the pair of his black eyes appeared his spirit. Li Man didn't know whether he was malnourished or ill, but facing him, she began to spread her maternal love without any reason. Seeing that he had entered her room, but did not go any further than the wall just to keep watch over her, made her heart soften. Walking forward, Li Man slightly bent down, rubbed his little head and laughed. How long have you lying over there? Why didn't you call me? By the way, do you know if there are any sewing materials at home? Knowing he couldn't understand her. When she finished speaking, she took his little hand and brought him to the yard. She pointed at the sheets and the futon on the wall, and made the gesture of sewing with a needle. Li Xiaowu was very clever, and he immediately grasped her meaning. He rushed to the east house, and then took out a small basket which was equipped with needlework, scissors, and a few rags. Oh, you're really quick. Li Man fondly ruffled his hair. Li Xiaowu couldn't hold himself back, and his face lighted up in a full bright smile. When he saw the figure behind Li Man, his smile grew even bigger. Fourth brother. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 14. Chapter 14, Teenager. Fourth brother, Li Xiaowu called out while running to Li Hua's side like a little bird with his arms out to hug his older brother. Curious, Li Man turned her head to look and saw a 16-year-old teenager. He was lightly patting Xiaowu's head. With a slight smile on his lips, he said, Xiaowu, you've gotten taller again, but... A tall figure, a handsome and elegant face, and a worn-out dark blue robe. It had been washed so many times that it was starting to lose its color, but it was clean and properly mended. He also had a gray satchel. Li Xiaowu happily took his older brother's satchel from him and put it on himself to carry it. Then, he stood on his toes and whispered something into his fourth brother's ear. Li Hua turned his head and looked at Li Man with a slight smile. Then, holding his younger brother's hand, he walked to her side. Li Man suddenly felt a bit nervous. Who was this teenager? Xiaowu told me everything. It's been hard on you. His voice sounded young and sweet. It seemed that he hadn't gone through his adolescent voice changed yet. Li Man felt confused. Li Xiaowu was peeking out from behind his fourth brother and smiling at her too. Li Hua thought she was just feeling shy and uneasy, so he held his younger brother's hand and went inside the eastern hut. Li Man looked in that direction. The door was open for the eastern hut, but Li Man couldn't see what they were doing inside. Anyways, was this teenager also part of their family? Thinking of their somewhat similar appearances, Li Man though the answer was a definite yes. But, a family of 5 brothers, that seemed a bit too much. The sun was about to set behind the mountain soon. The bed sheets and quilt covering that she had hanged in the courtyard had finished drying a while ago. The quilt was also nice and warm from absorbing the sun's rays. Li Man brought them inside and spread them over the heated bed in the western hut. After that, it was time for her to mend the quilt. Mending the quilts turned out much more difficult than Li Man had expected. She had originally thought that once she had a needle and thread, it would be the same as mending clothes. But just piercing the needle through the quilt once took strenuous effort, and it took the effort a baby exerted to drink milk to pull the needle out on the other side. On her first attempt, she ended up using too much force to pull the needle through and ended up messing up the covering for the quilt, so she had pulled it back into the correct position again. The next 3 stitches went as badly as the first one. By this time, she did the 4th stitch. Li Man was exhausted, and her forehead was covered in sweat. Moreover, her fingers ached. The quilt was very thick to begin with. Combined with 2 layers that were wrapped around it, she had to exert all the strength in her fingers in order to pull the needle and thread through it. After a few times of doing this, her thumb and finger had been rubbed red. But she had been the one that took this apart. It would be unreasonable if she didn't sew it back together. Gritting her teeth, Li Man continued to sew and silently scolded herself for being meddlesome. Ah! A moment of carelessness and the needle pierced her finger. Beads of dark red blood dripped out. A pleasant-sounding male voice asked, "What's wrong, Dot?" Before Li Man could react, that tall and thin teenager had put her finger into his mouth and was sucking on it. Li Man was overwhelmed for a moment. To her surprise, her face flushed and her heart was beating faster. "It's okay now." Li Hua let go of her finger. Looking at the crooked sewing she had done, he chuckled and said, "Let me do it." He took out a thimble from a bamboo basket and covered his right thumb with it, then he picked up the needle and started to skillfully and nimbly mend the quilt, stitch by stitch. Li Man felt struck dumb by this sight. There shouldn't be such a big difference, right? And yet, this handsome teenager that had a sparkling appearance was sitting in front of her and holding a needle and thread in his long, slender fingers. In and out of the quilt, the needle and thread left behind a fine and graceful line of stitches. His expression looked focused, and his movements were skilled. His eyes were focused on looking at the quilt, and his long eyelashes were naturally curling up a bit. His slender cheeks were slightly red, his lips were tightly pressed together. After he was done with the thread, he raised his hand and lightly bit the thread to break it off. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 15. Chapter 15, Similar. Li Hua threaded the needle with new thread. Noticing someone's gaze on his body, he instinctively raised his head and met Li Man's gaze. He seemed to be frozen in surprise for a moment, but soon after, his lips curved up slightly. He gently smiled and said, "Actually, this isn't difficult. It's much easier to use force if you're wearing a thimble. Your fingers won't get hurt either." After saying this, he raised his hand and demonstrated a stitch for her. The 5 members of Li family all had very attractive eyes, especially the teenager in front of her. His eyes were pure and warm like a clear sky. Being looked at with those eyes, Li Man felt the tips of her ears getting hot. Feeling a bit guilty, she said, "It's getting late. I'm going to go cook dinner." Right after saying these words, she hurriedly turned to the side and ran out of the hut. There was a flash of uncertainty in Li Hua's eyes. He said to Xiaowu, "Go and keep her company." Her accent sounded like the one from the capital, her small, round face, her beautiful, big, sparkling eyes, her long eyelashes, her elegant and petite appearance, her snow-white skin, and her especially slender and delicate fingers. Her hands didn't seem suitable to do rough work. Li Hua's eyebrows slightly scrunched up. He lowered his head and went back to mending the quilt, but the recent image of Li Man bashfully fleeing flashed through his mind. The teenager's attractive lips curved up even more. "Fourth brother, what are you smiling about?" Li Xiaowu was lying on the quilt with his head raised to look up at his older brother. Li Hua's fingers paused for a moment. His eyes narrowed as he looked at his younger brother. "Why didn't you go?" "I already went, but older sister said she could cook by herself, so I came back," Li Xiaowu said. Actually, he wanted to keep older sister company, but he also wanted to keep his 4th brother company too. Instead of continuing the conversation, Li Hua went back to mending the quilt. His technique was meticulous and neat. It didn't take long before he finished sewing the first quilt. He folded it and put it to the side. Then, he started on the second quilt. There were 3 quilts to mend in total. Perhaps, Li Man wouldn't have been able to finish sewing them even if she worked non-stop until the sky was dark. After finishing the quilts, since he already had a needle in his hand, Li Hua continued sitting on Li Man's heated bed and mended the rips on Li Mo's clothes that had torn during his hunting. After finishing with this, he looked at Li Shu's shabby clothes that he had outgrown by now and thought it was about time for him to alter a few sets of clothing so that they would be suitable for his younger brother to wear. But the sky had darkened a lot. Should he go see how her cooking was going? Remembering the embarrassed look in Li Man's big eyes, Li Hua chuckled. After putting away the clothes, bamboo basket, and other items, he left the hut and headed towards the kitchen. There was more natural light in the kitchen. A gentle strand of light from the setting sun passed through the window and fell on Li Man, who was standing at the stove and cooking. At this moment, it felt as something has firmly knocked against Li Hua's heart. Pausing at the doorway, he actually forgot about walking inside. Li Shu was crouched down by the cooking fire. Seeing his fourth brother at the doorway, he loudly called out, "Fourth brother." Hearing Shu's voice, Li Man turned her head to follow his line of sight and greeted Li Hua with a splitting grin. Her earlier embarrassment had already faded away. It would be fine if she just treated this teenager as a big child that was only halfway to adulthood. With a slight smile, Li Hua entered the room. But, seeing that there wasn't anything that needed his help, he left the room and stood under the eaves. He raised his head and looked at the drifting clouds and the gorgeous setting sun. Li Man didn't expect to see such a similar image in this strange and unfamiliar world. In the modern world, there had been a teenager that looked so pure, he seemed like someone from a painting. Around dusk, at the rooftop of the school building, he would always quietly stand there by himself and look at the sky. A gentle breeze would stroke his short hair as it passed through. The backdrop of the setting sun's hazy golden light accompanied the side profile of his handsome face. He was so attractive that other people could only admire him. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 16. Chapter 16, A Family Member. Older sister, what are you looking at? Li Shu snuggled up by Li Man's side and also looked outside. Other than fourth brother, there wasn't anyone else. Li Man returned to her senses and inwardly laughed. Over a decade had passed since that old memory. 10 years of marriage and living together had made her indifferent to it. It was surprising that something today would make her relive that memory so clearly. Why haven't your other older brothers returned yet? Go and fetch them for dinner. As Li Man was making an eating food gesture at Shu, a light suddenly flashed in her mind. Leaving Shu behind, she rushed outside, grabbed Li Hua's hand, and pulled him to the peach tree. Li Hua felt confused, but before he could say anything, he saw Li Man breaking off a branch, leaning over, and writing on the ground, "Who am I?" Li Hua took the branch she offered, didn't say anything, and only expressed his confusion in writing. "You know how to write?" Did the original owner of this body not know how to write? Had she exposed herself as a fake? Li Man hurriedly took the branch back and wrote out 2 sentences. "I'm not sure. I don't remember anything." Li Hua lowered his hand. Looking at those 2 lines, he didn't reply for a long time. Worried, Li Man used the branch to point at the words, "Who am I?" Then, she pointed at herself. Her eyes were full of pleading. As Li Hua looked at her eyes, a complicated feeling flashed through his clear eyes. In the end, he took the branch from her and wrote out the words, "family member," by her question. Family member? What did he mean? Were they her siblings? Just as she wanted to ask this question, the other 3 members of Li family returned. Fourth brother? These words were almost said in unison. Just from the tone of their voices, Li Man could tell that they were very happy to see the return of their brother. Oldest brother, second brother, third brother. Li Hua very joyfully went forward to greet them. Li Yan lazily draped his arm on Li Hua's shoulder and quietly asked into his ear, "What were the two of you doing?" Li Hua shook his head. "Nothing important." Seeing that his third brother, Li Shu, was carrying 2 buckets of fish with a shoulder pole, he wanted to help him and hurriedly walked to his side. Li Shu loved his younger brother dearly, so of course he wouldn't let him help. "It's okay. Don't touch them. They're very smelly." Looking at his fourth brother, a rarely seen gentleness appeared in Li Mo's eyes. "When did you come back?" "This afternoon," Li Hua replied. "Oldest brother, is the wound on your leg better?" "It healed a long time ago. He had gotten that injury over a month ago." Seeing that his oldest brother was walking normally, Li Hua stopped worrying. Li Shu brought the 2 buckets full of fish to the northeast corner of their home, then he dumped all of the fish into a deep hole that he had dug in advance and had filled with water. Once the fishes entered the water, each and every one of them became quite lively. Li Man was blankly standing in the same spot. Seeing these brothers happily talking and laughing with each other, she didn't know how to feel. Li Hua's earlier answer had been too vague. Following after his older brothers, Li Hua headed towards the kitchen's entrance. When he turned his head and saw that Li Man was still conspicuously standing underneath the peach tree with her eyes lowered in a confused expression, he turned around and walked back to her. He wanted to say something, but then he remembered that she wouldn't be able to understand. And so, he just reached his hand out to hold hers. Surprised, Li Man raised her head. Li Hua broadly smiled at her. Holding her hand, he led her towards the kitchen. Looking at his thin, but straight figure, Li Man suddenly felt that he was a dependable and warm person. A family member? Right, she seemed to have heard from Xiaowu that this family's last name was Li. And, from the transmigration novels that she had read, it seemed that most people transmigrated into people with the same names as themselves. Then, the original owner of this body must have also been called Li Man. So then, was this teenager her older brother or her younger brother? If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 17. Chapter 17, Adding Food to Her Bowl. Li Man suddenly smiled. Thinking of how caring this teenager had been towards her, she guessed that he was probably her older brother. Seeing her smile, the 2 men at the doorway swayed as if they were looking at dazzling goddess. Leading Li Man to the doorway, Li Hua lightly said to the 2 stunned men, "Older brothers, it's time to eat." Li Mo said, "Oh," and hastily entered the hut. In contrast, leaning against the doorway, Li Yan whispered into his fourth brother's ear, "Still not letting go?" Li Hua faintly smiled. His hand subconsciously tightened around Li Man's. He led her straight past Li Yan and had her sit down at a stool while he went to get the food himself. Dinner was simple. Li Man had braised the mountain chicken and steamed a large pot of rice. When Li Hua saw the large pot of rice, he froze for a moment in surprise. Rice was expensive. In their family, they were reluctant to eat rice even once a month. Moreover, the rice would be used to make congee to spread it out more. Li Mo had already finished scooping out rice for everyone. Looking at this fourth brother, he chuckled and said, "Let's eat." Although women couldn't really support themselves, as long as their family of brothers worked hard, they wouldn't let her suffer. Since she loved to eat rice, then they would eat rice every day in the future. By the time the bowls of rice and plate of chicken were brought over to the table, Li Shu had already finished washing and came inside. Seeing that there was meat and rice, he cheerfully said, "Oh. Life isn't the same after you have a woman." They were eating rice 2 meals in a row. Everyone's gazes subconsciously drifted towards Li Man's direction. Li Man had been in the middle of stretching her hand out to pick up a piece of meat. Suddenly faced with everyone looking at her, her fingers slipped and the piece of chicken liver dropped onto the table. Her small face turned totally red. What were they doing? Were they holding a grudge against her for eating meat? Feeling a bit wronged, she subconsciously drew back her chopsticks. "Do you like this?" Li Hua picked up the dropped slice of chicken liver from the table and put it into his own bowl. Then, he selected a piece of chicken liver from the plate and put it into Li Man's bowl. Before Li Man could respond, Li Yan had already added a chicken leg into her bowl. "The meat on the leg is tender and smells delicious. Here's another piece." Li Shu dug around the plate before finally finding a piece of chicken liver and quickly putting it into Li Man's bowl. "Older sister, eat mine too." Li Shu didn't want to be left out. He stood up, selected the piece of meat that he thought was the best, and added it to Li Man's bowl. Li Mo had also picked up a piece of meat and wanted to give it to Li Man, but he felt embarrassed to do it in front of his younger brothers. So, he gave the meat to Xiaowu and said, "Let's all eat. The food will get cold soon." And then, taking advantage of when everyone had lowered their heads to eat, Li Mo speedily picked up a piece of meat and without having time to clearly look at what it was, he placed it in Li Man's bowl. He thought that no one had noticed his action. Li Man's head had been lowered to eat the chicken leg. Out of nowhere, there was suddenly another piece of meat in her bowl, but it was a chicken head? Who tossed the chicken head into her bowl? Li Man was so scared that she almost knocked over the bowl when she pushed it away. Li Hua was sitting next to Li Man. Seeing the chicken head that had appeared in her bowl, he immediately understood. He quickly took the chicken head from her bowl and said, "Don't be afraid." Li Shu looked over and called out, "Who added that? And made their wife so scared that her face had turned so pale?" Li Yan resisted the urge to laugh and looked at his oldest brother with a mild mocking gaze. Li Mo was sitting across from him. Inwardly feeling vexed with himself, Li Mo practically buried his head into his bowl of rice. Why was it a chicken head? It had clearly felt like a chicken leg. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 18. Chapter 18, Teasing. After the disturbance caused by the pheasant head persisted for a little bit, everyone went back to peacefully eating dinner. Li Man didn't let them add any more food to her bowl. Anyways, she had been the one that cooked this food. Why should she feel timid about eating it? Moreover, this pheasant truly tasted delicious. After dinner, just like the past times, they wouldn't let Li Man wash the dishes and pots. Li Man happily returned to her hut to rest. The quilt had already been spread over the bed, and there were even neatly stacked clothes that she could wear at the head of the bed. Remembering that flower-like teenager, Li Man smiled. Picking up the clothes and holding them in her hands, she sat down on the heated bed and became lost in her thoughts. An indeterminate time later, she heard the sound of knocking at her door. She said, "Come in." Li Shu brought in a small bucket of warm water for her to use to wash up. Li Man thanked him. After he had left and closed the door, she somewhat blankly looked at the warm water. Weren't they treating her a little too nice? They had been delivering warm water to her hut every day so that she could take a bath. Were they really her brothers? But then, thinking of what had happened on the day she transmigrated here, she thought they were most likely just feeling bad for her because of how she had suffered on that day, so they were taking extra good care of her. This was just like when she had been a child. If she got sick or had been bullied, her parents would go overboard in pampering her. Oh well, regardless if they were her real family or not, she would just treat them like her family members in the future. As Li Man finally discarded her confused emotional state and was about to wash up, she heard hoots of laughter from the kitchen. What were they doing over there? In the kitchen, Li Mo's handsome face was smeared with an expression of wanting to laugh and cry. How could he have known that was a pheasant head? Once all of his younger brothers found out that it had been him who added the pheasant head to Li Man's bowl, they all had a good time of teasing him. AI. After his younger brothers had finished laughing, Li Mo finally put away his earlier expression and seriously said, "Alright, let's discuss serious matters now." "Huh? Li Shu still hadn't been able to stop his lips from smiling yet. But Li Mo was looking at Li Hua as he asked, "Fourth brother, how many days did you request to take off this time?" Teacher Su had to go to a provincial city to do some business. "It'll take him 10 days before he can come back, so it doesn't count as me taking time off this time," Li Hua answered. Li Shu was pleasantly surprised. "Oh, that means you can stay home for longer then, fourth brother." He placed his hand on Li Hua's shoulder and said with a smile, "This time, you'll be able to finish telling the story from last time, right, but?" Li Hua smiled and lightly nodded. Soon after, he asked Li Mo, "Oldest brother, is something the matter?" Leaning against the top of the cooking range, Li Yan looked at Li Hua with a smile on his lips. "You seem to have hit it off with that woman." Something flickered in Li Hua's gaze. "Second brother, why would you say something like that?" "Fourth brother," Li Mo suggested, "go with third brother tomorrow to sell fish at the market. Bring her along with you. The money from selling fish doesn't need to be brought back. Use it to buy some clothes for her." Li Hua thought of the clothes that Li Man had been wearing. Not only was it coarse, it was also their mother's old clothing before she had passed away. Hearing that they were going to go to the market, Li Shu hurriedly pleaded with Li Mo, "Oldest brother, I want to go too." Li Mo affectionately looked at his youngest brother. "It's too far away. You won't be able to walk that far." Li Shu dearly cared for his youngest brother and hastily said, "That's not a problem. Oldest brother, if he can't walk that far, he can sit on the cart too." Li Hua nodded. "Oldest brother, don't worry. I'll take good care of them." Li Mo finally consented. Li Yan faintly smiled and said, "Fourth brother, there's not much rice left. Buy some more tomorrow. Also, if there's anything that she wants to buy more of it for her." Li Hua made a sound of agreement. Once the brothers had properly discussed this amongst themselves, they all went to sleep. Tonight, because the quilts had soaked up the sunlight and the sheets were all clean and soft from being washed, it felt especially comfortable. Everyone also slept especially well. As they had expected, life was better when there was a woman around. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 19. Chapter 19, Deliberate. The next day, Li Man didn't sleep in. Hearing sounds from the neighboring hut, she got out of bed too. It was an early morning in April, and the air was slightly chilly. There was a faintly refreshing and sweet feeling. Li Man went to the kitchen right after tidying up. She had been planning on making breakfast, but Li Yan had already cooked a pot of congee and was making millet pancakes in another pan. Seeing her coming into the kitchen, he showed his usual, charming smile. "Awake? There's hot water over here. You can use it to wash up. The food will be ready soon." After saying this, knowing that she probably didn't understand him, he scooped out hot water into a container and handed it to her without waiting for her to respond. "Here, for you." Li Man hurriedly went to accept the bowl. "Thank you. Keep it steady." Li Yan chuckled. Li Man didn't know if he had done it deliberately or not, but his slightly cold fingers slid across the back of her hand when she took the container of water from him. She felt a strange feeling bubbling up inside her. Li Man's hand trembled, and she almost dropped the container. Li Yan steadied the container with his hand and asked with a smile, "Is it too heavy?" Li Man suspiciously looked at him. His appearance looked elegant, and his smile looked amiable and warm. There weren't any signs of improperness. Perhaps he had just accidentally touched her hand. "Thank you, I can hold it by myself." Li Man felt slightly awkward and thought that she was just being oversensitive. Holding the container, Li Man turned around with a blushing face and left the kitchen. She didn't know that behind her, a crafty, "I got away with something" smile was gradually appearing on Li Yan's face. From the doorway of the other hut, Li Hua had seen everything. After waiting until Li Man had gone inside the western hut, he entered the kitchen. Second brother, the food is burning. Li Yan didn't stop smiling and only hurriedly took out some of the slightly burnt millet pancakes from the pan. Older brother made some extra millet pancakes today. Pack some of them with you. If you get hungry on the road, you'll have something to snack on. Li Hua sat down. He glanced at Li Yan, then he seemingly absent-mindedly asked, "Second brother, I heard that you're going to older sister Mutant's house to work today?" Li Yan's brow slightly furrowed. Soon after, it relaxed as he smiled. "Yeah, and it'll be a big job too. Older sister Mutant is going to marry and move to a county town." Second brother, feeling slightly worried, Li Hua looked at his second brother with concern. Li Yan put down the plate that he had been holding. With a slightly controlled expression, he seriously said, "Fourth brother, I know what you want to say. I'm fine. I don't have the type of relationship with her that you guys think I do." Li Hua didn't know if he should believe his second brother's words. But, since he had said he was fine, then he wouldn't ask him any more questions. As Li Yan scooped up some water to wash his hands, he ordered his younger brother, his oldest brother and the rest of them ready. "Go and tell them to come here to eat breakfast." Li Hua made a sound of assent. Right after leaving the kitchen, he saw Li Man coming out of her hut to pour out the water that she had used to wash her face. He said, "Time to eat." After a few days, Li Man could understand the meaning of these words. At the other side of the yard, Li Mo and Li Shu were taking out all of the fish from the deep hole. Since they had been in water this entire time, the fish were still very lively and fresh even after a night had passed. This way, they would be able to sell these fish for a good price at the market. Once they were finished with their work, they washed their hands and went to the kitchen to eat. After they had finished eating breakfast, Li Shu carried the 2 buckets of fish onto the small cart. Li Hua was holding Li Shaowu's hand. Li Man hadn't expected that she would be going with them, but when she found that she would be, her heart was filled with excitement. Would the marketplace in ancient times be similar to the ones that she had seen on TV? Li Man was in high spirits, and her steps felt light. They passed through the village's entrance and got onto a road that led to the back mountain. There were many people on this road. The other people were doing the same thing as them, pushing carts with fish to the market to sell them. Suddenly, a melodious voice called out from behind them, "Older brother Hua." Li Man turned her head and saw that a pair of beautiful, young girls had already run over to Li Hua's side. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 20. Chapter 20, Lending a Helping Hand. Older brother Hua, is it really you? When did you come back? The person asking this question was a 14 to 15-year-old teenage girl. She was wearing a dress that had a scattered flower design. She had a very pretty, cheerful appearance. Her dark, limpid eyes were focused on Li Hua and filled with joyful surprise. "Yesterday," Li Hua very politely replied, but he didn't look at her with equal familiarity. On the other side, Li Shu put the cart down to a resting position. Looking at that girl, he introduced her to Li Hua in a somewhat mocking tone, "She's third uncle's daughter, Chunny." He didn't know if he should say his fourth brother was dense or meticulous. He had a photographic memory, but if he didn't care about someone, he would never be able to remember him or her. Clutching the shiny braid by her chest and looking at Li Hua, Chunny playfully pouted. "Older brother Hua, did you forget about me again? I even brought jujubes to your house during New Year." Li Hua remembered the jujubes. After New Year had passed, oldest brother had grabbed 2 large handfuls of jujubes and stuffed them into his school bag. But he really didn't have any memory of this girl. "Chunny, are you going to the market too?" "Yup, my dad and mom are over there." Chunny pointed at the married couple that were behind them and also pushing a cart with bamboo baskets that were filled with fish. She waved at them and said, "Mom, I'm over here." Taking advantage of this opportunity, Li Hua walked to Li Shu's side and lowered his hands towards the cart. "Third brother, let me push the cart." Li Shu tactfully moved aside, then he said to Chunny, "Chunny, third uncle's legs and feet aren't good. Hurry and go back to help him push the cart." Instead of listening to Li Shu, Chunny skirted over to Li Hua's side. As she was leaning over to start helping him, she replied, "It's fine. My mom is over there and helping him." He stared at her for a moment, then he pulled Chunny over and said, "Little girl, there's me and fourth brother here. You should still go back and help third uncle. Besides, third aunt will be unhappy if she sees you over here with us." "She won't." Feeling a bit anxious, she hurriedly tugged on the other girl that hadn't said a single word yet. "Qiqiao, hurry and tell them. Wasn't my mom the one that told me to come over here to help them?" Qiqiao looked to be a year or two older than her, but her personality was much shyer. Hearing that Chunny had pulled her into the conversation and faced with Li Shu's long and narrow, peach blossom eyes, her cheeks flushed, and she couldn't utter a single word. Chunny could only speak for herself. "It's true. Third brother, my mom heard that oldest brother Li was getting married. She's even planning on buying some wedding presents at the market today and having me bring them over tonight." "What do you mean oldest brother is getting married?" There was something incorrect with her words. "Third brother, it's not early anymore. If we don't hurry up and get to the market late, it won't be easy to sell the fish." Li Hua didn't like outsiders discussing his family matters. Besides, Li Man and Xiaowu were still waiting for them. These two people, one of them didn't understand what was going on because of a language barrier, and the other one was too young and pure-minded to understand. He didn't want them to be harmed by an outsider's criticism. Let's go." Li Shu didn't pay any more attention to the two teenage girls and directly walked to Li Hua's side. Although Li Hua was a young man, he wasn't used to doing any type of manual labor or as familiar with pushing a cart as Li Shu. In the past, the cart had almost ended falling into a ditch several times with Li Hua pushing. Li Shu laughed at his younger brother. He had only spent 2 years studying, but he was already very clumsy with performing manual labor. He pushed Li Hua to the side and pushed the cart by himself. At the front, Li Man was holding Li Xiaowu's hand and hadn't paying attention to what was happening behind her at all. The two of them were chatting and smiling as they walked. Actually, even though they couldn't understand what the other person was saying, the feeling of excitement and expectation over seeing new things was the same in every language. Li Man asked, "What kind of stuff will the market have? Will there be sugar-coated Chinese hawthorns on sticks? People practicing sideshows? People selling their skills or craft? Someone performing a martial arts trick by breaking a large slab of stone that had been placed someone else's stomach?" Li Xiaowu said, "Second brother said there'll be a lot of people, yummy food, and fun stuff there. Fourth brother said that after they sell the fish, he'd buy me dumplings with meat." Li Man added, "All right, will there be people selling themselves into slavery in order to earn money to bury their parents? Or, will there be overly dramatic scenes of a local tyrant kidnapping women on the streets? I wonder what the heroes in ancient times will look like." Li Xiaowu said, "Older sister, oldest brother told me that the marketplace will be crowded and there might be bad people around. You definitely have to stay close to us when we get to market later. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 21. Chapter 21, Sister-in-law. The closest market to Shenyegu was in Songfeng Town. To get to Songfeng Town, you had to go up and down 2 mountains, then walk 1,000 meters. When they got through one mountain, Li Man was still in high spirits. By the time they reached the top of the second mountain, Li Man was dragging her feet. In the last 1,000 meters, she really couldn't walk another step, so Li Shu had her sitting down in the cart. Looking at Li Shu, who was drenched in sweat, Li Man felt very bad about adding her weight to the cart. 2 buckets full of fish wasn't light to begin with, and Li Shu had already pushed the cart over 2 mountains. She tried to get off the cart several times, but Li Shu wouldn't agree. Later on, Li Hua also helped in pushing the cart, and she felt even worse. Xiaowu was younger than her, but he was still walking. Even if she had to crawl to the market, it would still be a less shameful option. However, Li Hua wrote out that they knew she couldn't walk anymore. It would be more bothersome for them if she ended up fainting from overexerting herself. Thinking it over, Li Man agreed. She didn't have any better alternative than complying. However, as soon as they arrived at Songfeng town, Li Man hurriedly came down from the cart. Looking at Li Shu's forehead that was covered in sweat, she felt apologetic and grateful. Her heart felt moved. "You worked really hard." Li Shu laughed, which revealed his very clean teeth. He took off his outer garment and used it to wipe his forehead. "Hey, so this is oldest sister-in-law, huh? She's so weak and delicate, ah." Pulling Qiqiao along with her, Chunny caught up to them again. She stared at Li Man with an uncharitable gaze. Li Man looked at this teenage girl with a confused gaze. Was she speaking to her? Why did it feel sort of hostile? Li Shu glared at Chunny. "She's your third sister-in-law too." Remembering that Li Hua was next to him, he added, "She might be your fourth sister-in-law too. Anyways, she's your sister-in-law." Chunny and Qiqiao were stunned into silence. Li Hua was worried that they would say something else, so he said to Li Man and Xiaowu, "Go over there to sit down and rest." Oh. Li Man could feel that these 2 teenage girls didn't have any goodwill towards her, so she followed Xiaowu to a corner of a building to rest. Once Li Man left, Chunny immediately reacted. Tugging on Li Hua's sleeve, she asked in surprise, "Older brother Hua, never mind about their decisions. You're a scholar. You'll have a wonderful future. Are you really going to follow them and marry that woman too?" Li Hua unhappily pulled his sleeve from her grasp. Looking at her, he lightly said, "Chunqiao, stop standing here and blocking our way. We're going to sell fish here." Hearing the words Chunqiao, Chunny was a bit flabbergasted. "I'm Chunny." "Chunny?" Li Hua looked at his third brother, Li Shu, in confusion. Li Shu shrugged. Nodding his head, he said, "She's called Chunny." Li Hua turned his head back to look at Chunny again. Chunny had already been angered to point that her face was flushed. "Older brother Hua, do you still not remember my name?" Li Hua resisted his temper and patiently asked, "Chunny? Did you come over here for a reason?" Chunny was dumbfounded. Older brother Hua? She had liked him since they were children. Did he really not notice? Qiqiao. Chunny didn't feel comfortable saying her own feelings aloud, so she pulled forward Qiqiao, who had been silently feeling broken-hearted. She pointed at Li Shu, who was getting ready to sell fish by taking out a scale. "Third brother, Qiqiao has always liked you. How can you marry another woman?" Li Shu froze in surprise. Soon after, he faked smiled. "Little girl, don't joke about this type of thing with your third brother. My wife is sitting right over there." Third brother. "Selling fish here. Fat and big fish, very fresh, hurry over and buy some." Li Shu didn't pay any more attention to her. He wasn't interested in Qiqiao. Even if he was interested in her, it wouldn't matter. In their village, every family wanted to marry their daughter to a family that was outside the village. Moreover, Qiqiao's parents were hoping that they would be able to exchange their daughter for extra wedding money, i.e. money that a couple gets during their wedding from relatives, in order to find wives for their 2 sons. Chunny turned to look at Li Hua again. "Older brother Hua, as long as you." Li Hua didn't even wait for her to finish speaking before apologetically saying, "I'm busy." He walked to Li Shu's side and started helping him with collecting money and making change. Seeing that Li Hua was ignoring her, she angrily stamped her feet. When she turned her head back and saw Chicha stealthily wiping tears from her face, she gritted her teeth and said, "Older sister Chicha, you're so useless. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 22. Chapter 22, Not Leaving. Li Man rested her chin in her hands. She was resting on a flight of stairs with Li Shu and engrossed with watching Li Shu and Li Hua selling fish. Actually, the scene in front of her looked very different than what she had thought selling fish would look like. Li Shu had only shouted a couple of times to advertise before the nearby older and younger wives and other womenfolk streamed out of their homes and flocked the stand as if this had been a pre-arranged meeting. Although the stand was surrounded, it wasn't chaotic. These women orderly assembled themselves into a line. One by one, they came forward and without even picking at the fish, they directly said how many kilograms of fish they wanted. After that, Li Shu was responsible for weighing the fish, and Li Hua would collect money. Everything was conducted in a methodical manner. Before 2 hours had passed, the 2 baskets that had been filled with over 50 kilograms of fish had been sold out. It really was totally sold out. Li Man knew this because a couple of young wives that had come late hadn't been able to buy any fish. Left with no other choice, the young wives could only go to other people's stands to buy fish. They looked as if they suffered a huge grievance as they did so. As Li Shu cleaned up the stand, Li Hua walked over to them. "Are you guys tired of waiting?" Li Man stood up and shook her head. Li Shu hugged Li Hua's arm and very hopefully asked, "Fourth brother, are we going to go buy steamed buns now?" "And, we'll be going soon." Li Hua indulgently ruffled Shu's hair. Although he was nodding, his warm gaze had leisurely fallen onto Li Man. Faced with his gaze, Li Man was at a loss. After she blinked a couple of times, she saw him taking the money bag from his side and handing it to her. "There's a ready-made clothing store over there. Take this and buy 2 sets of clothing for yourself." "Ah? Buy clothes for herself? No need. I think the clothes I'm wearing is pretty nice." She knew that this family was poor, and they had only gotten this money from recently selling the fish. But Li Hua kept insisting on stuffing the money they had gotten from selling fish into her hands. Because it was all loose change, the filled bag was quite heavy. "Go on." Li Hua deeply looked at her, then he turned around, held Li Shu's hand, and walked back towards Li Shu. Last night, oldest brother had specially mentioned that this girl had tried to escape once. She didn't want to stay with their family, but if she was in Shenyegu, there was no way that she would be able to successfully escape. But, if she was brought to the town, it wouldn't be the same. The copper coins in the bag were the equivalent to a couple of silver taels. This wasn't much, but it would be enough for her to hire a carriage to take her away from here. Second brother had packed enough rations for 4 people to eat this morning. This would be enough food to last her for 1 day. He could only hope that she would have a good life after leaving here. Li Man stood frozen in place. When she opened the bag of money and saw the copper coins, she just felt dizzy. She didn't understand the currency system that was used in ancient times. "How much is this 1 copper worth?" She took out 1 copper coin for a closer look. She blankly looked at it for a moment, then stuffed it back into the bag. She turned around and ran toward Li Hua. After running over, Li Man tossed the bag of money into Li Hua's hand. She didn't even know the value of the coins here. How was she supposed to buy stuff by herself? Wasn't he worried that other people would trick her? "I'm giving this back to you." "I don't want it." Li Hua froze in surprise for a moment. His warm gaze was fixed on Li Man, and it gradually became hotter. "You? Was she not going to leave?" "I don't need it. The clothes I'm wearing right now is pretty good," Li Man said. This was truly how she felt. Li Shu had already finished packing up, and he had put back the clothes he had taken off before. Hearing their conversation, he knew exactly what was going on. He said, "Fourth brother, how could you let her buy clothes by herself? Other people won't know what she's saying. I'll leave the cart here for now. Let's go to the store together." Other than recognizing the words fourth brother, Li Man didn't understand the rest of Li Shu's jabbering. She thought that he was speaking to Li Hua and didn't know that they were talking about her. But, for an unknown reason to her, after Li Hua heard these words, he smiled at her and said, "Let's go. We'll go buy clothes for you first." Buy clothes? Li Man was a bit stunned. Li Hua's eyes were overflowing with emotion. His long arm stretched out and picked up her hand. Tightly holding her hand, he said, "Come with me. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 23. Chapter 23, Buying Clothes. At the front, a bouncing Li Shu, who appeared utterly elated, was tugging Li Shu forward. At the back, Li Man was feeling awkward and twisting her hand to remove it from Li Hua's grip. She wasn't a child and didn't need someone to hold her hand. "Let go. I'll walk by myself." She wanted to pull her hand out of his, but Li Hua tightened his grip as if he was afraid that she was going to run away. He had already released her once, and she had chosen to come back. In the future, he would never let her go. He turned his head and gently smiled at her as he consolingly said, "We're almost there." Li Man secretly rolled her eyes. This damn child. He looked so thin, but his grip was quite strong. When they arrived at the clothing store, the female proprietor warmly welcomed them and took out outfits in a variety of fashionable styles. Li Shu seemed overwhelmed from looking at so much clothing. He thought all of the clothing looked very pretty. If his wife was the one wearing them, they would look even better. He guaranteed that no one in Shenyegu would be able to compare with her. But Li Hua thought none of them looked good enough. These overly complicated and flashy styles didn't suit her at all. In the end, he selected 2 pieces of clothing with unobtrusive designs. Li Man thought his selections were pretty good and tried out the lilac outfit first. But, after she had changed her clothes and walked outside to look at the mirror, she was shocked by what she saw. The girl in the mirror hasn't fully matured yet, but she was still quite beautiful. She had a round face, tender white skin, and a pair of large, limpid eyes that was staring at herself in amazement. Wasn't this how she had looked like when she was about 14 to 15 years old? She forcefully pinched her face. There was a giddy, dizzy feeling as if she was dreaming. Li Hua hurriedly came over and tugged on her hand away from her face. "What's wrong? Do you not like it? Do you want to try another one?" Li Shu walked over too and looked at Li Man from top to bottom. "Ah, I think it looks really good." The color of this clothing complemented his wife's skin very nicely. Her skin looked as tender as freshly peeled hard-boiled egg. She looked just like a celestial fairy. "Third brother." Li Hua gave him a warning look. Li Shu pouted. He unwilling turned his head away and didn't continue to look, but in his heart, he thought that fourth brother was even more wicked than second brother. His fourth brother had already held her small hand, but he wouldn't even let his own brother look at her. The disparity in how they were each treated was too big. "Do you want to try this one?" Li Hua brought over a moon-white outfit. "No need." Li Man suddenly didn't want to try on any more clothing. Her heart felt strange. This teenage girl actually looked the same as herself when she was younger, even the dimple near her mouth was the same. Was this fate? Or had she originally belonged to this world? Seeing that her expression looked off, Li Hua didn't pursue the matter. Instead, he asked the lady boss how much the clothing cost. One outfit cost 80 copper coins. The other outfit cost 120 copper coins. If they bought both outfits, it would be exactly 200 coins. 200 copper coins? Li Shu suddenly thought that the clothing didn't look that good anymore. Li Hua squeezed the bag of money. He also thought that this clothing was expensive. The lady boss followed up by saying that the clothing was made with very good material, was very good, the style of these two outfits were beautiful, and how lovely it looked when Li Man was wearing it. However, in the end, Li Hua made a different decision. He selected 2 bolts of fabric with similar colors, the outfits that he had chosen, and asked for their price. The lady boss straightforwardly told him that the price was the same for both bolts. 1 meter of the fabric was 10 copper coins. After the lady boss cut the amount of fabric that Li Hua wanted and cleaned away the scraps, she only charged them 70 copper coins. Li Man didn't understand the bargaining that had happened between them, but seeing that they were buying pieces of cloth instead of pre-made clothing, she was left feeling a bit stunned. Is there a seamstress in the village? Understanding that she was feeling confused, Li Hua said, when we get back home, I'll make the clothing for you. Come on, let's go buy steamed buns. Li Shu trusted his 4th brother's skills and wasn't worried that he would ruin the fabric at all. Li Shu pulled Li Xiaowu out of the store with him, so Li Man immediately followed after them. She was worried that Li Hua would hold her hand again. Holding the fabric, Li Hua walked behind the group. Just as he was about to exit the store, he saw a bolt of light pink silk on a shelf from his peripheral vision. Looking at Li Man's delicate and seductive figure again, his gaze gleamed. /N, can you guess what old 4 wants the bolt of light pink silk for? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 24. Chapter 24, Steamed Buns. After Li Man had gone outside, she turned her head around when she noticed that Li Hua hadn't followed after them. He was actually measuring out more cloth with the lady boss. Was there a need to buy more cloth? When Li Shu and Little Five reached the stand that sold steamed buns, they realized that the bag of money was still with Li Hua and hurriedly rushed back. Li Shu said, 4th brother, what are you doing? Li Hua had already stuffed the newly purchased fabric into his cloth bag. He smiled and said, I thought the change from our recent purchase was wrong, so I went back to double check. Oh. Li Shu didn't care. He grasped Li Hua's shoulder with one hand and said, let's go buy steamed buns. It's 2 steamed buns for 1 copper coin. They're filled with meat. Li Man was waiting from a distance behind them. When they walked back, she quietly resumed walking by their side. Little Five pulled his hand out of Li Shu's and wrapped his arm around Li Man's arm. Li Man gently patted his arm and softly asked, you're feeling really hungry, right? She had seen how energetically he had run towards the steamed bun stand the first time. Little Five brilliantly smiled at her, pointed at the steamed bun stand in front of them, and said, older sister, we're going over there to eat steamed buns. 2 steamed meat buns costs 1 copper coin, and 3 steamed vegetable buns only cost 1 copper coin. Li Hua spent 5 copper coins to buy 10 steamed meat buns. He gave 3 buns to Li Shu, 2 buns to Little Five, and 2 buns to Li Man, then he wrapped up the remaining buns. 4th brother, why aren't you eating any? Li Shu asked as he ate one of the steamed buns. These steamed buns smelled really delicious. Li Hua took out a millet pancake from his bag. After eating a bite, he said with a smile, I like to eat 2nd brother's pancakes more. Steamed meat buns in ancient times were truly substantial for their price. They were very big with plenty of meat filling that was almost swimming in greasy fat. Just 1 bite was enough for the oil to spill out from the corners of your mouth. After eating just 1 bite, Li Man almost couldn't force herself to take a 2nd bite. So unbearably greasy. But it wouldn't be good to give someone a steamed bun that she had already bitten into. She could only grit her teeth and swallow each bite down. As for the remaining bun, she would rather die than eat it. She tried to give it to Little Five. Little Five was small and couldn't eat that much food either. He was already full from eating the 2 large steamed meat buns. Li Hua thought she was trying to save money, so he said, there's still more left. You can eat yours. How could she possibly eat another one? The millet pancakes were much better than the steamed meat buns. She hurriedly took out a millet pancake from his bag and said, "I'll eat this, but..." At first, Li Hua wanted to say more, but seeing that she truly seemed to be disgusted with the steamed meat buns, he dropped the subject. In the end, he ate the steamed bun that she had given little Five. These steamed buns and millet pancakes were basically their lunch. After they finished, they walked to the part of the market that sold vegetables and grains with Li Shu pushing the small cart. This market wasn't any different from a market in modern times. There was a complete selection of various vegetables and grains. Li Hua directly led them into a grocery store. Because of second brother's repeated reminders that Li Man liked to eat white rice, he bought a lot of white rice this time. He also stocked up on oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar. After these items were purchased and the small cart was almost full, Li Hua asked Li Man, "Is there anything that you want to buy?" Li Man had been waiting for him to ask this question. She excitedly tugged his arm and led him outside to a poultry cellar. She pointed at the baby chicken that were behind the big fence and said, "I want to buy this." A few thatched huts in a large courtyard with a fence, growing vegetables that she liked to eat in the garden, raising a few chickens, plus a large dog. Ah, what a lovely countryside scene. Looking at Li Man's sparkling eyes that seemed as if they were filled with countless stars, Li Hua smiled. "Sure, you can pick out the ones that you want. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 25. Chapter 25, Food Market. These fluffy, little chicks were too cute. They looked like mini pom-poms that had come to life. Li Man picked one up, but then she couldn't resist choosing another one too. She had this impulsive desire to buy all of the little chicks. Seeing how cute the little chicks were, little Five wanted to enter the pen and play with them too, but Li Hua stopped him. Crouching on the outside part of the fence, Li Shu felt a bit anxious. These little things all look the same. Why don't you just randomly grab a few? Li Hua could guess what Li Man was thinking. He was worried that at her current rate, she wouldn't be able to choose what chicks she wanted even after the sun had set. He handed the cloth bag to little Five, then he entered the pen, carefully walked to Li Man, pointed at the little chick she was currently holding, and said, "This one is pretty good." "Really?" Feeling quite happy, Li Man's heart suddenly softened as she looked at the little chick's bright, black eyes. "I'll choose this one then." N. As Li Hua picked up a few more chicks and placed them inside a large wicker basket, he said, "All of these chicks are pretty good. You recently picked up these chicks, and they all like you now. See, they're even reluctant to walk away from you." "Really?" She hadn't noticed. All of these chicks looked as if they were formed from the same mold, and she couldn't differentiate one from the other. But, since Li Hua had said these words, she thought that this must be true. A feeling of mutual fondness suddenly welled up in her heart. "Then, let's take these chicks." "Okay, let's take this slowly." Li Hua picked up the large wicker basket and held Li Man's hand as they carefully went around the cluster of little chicks and left the pen. They purchased 6 chicks in total, and the shop owner even gave them a small wicker basket for free to hold the chicks. Li Man looked at the little chicks as if they were her most beloved treasure. She hugged the small wicker basket close to her chest. However, when Li Hua was paying the shop owner for the chicks, the shop owner said he was also selling piglets. Did Li Man want to buy any? Yes, of course she wanted them. Li Man had been thinking that her family's courtyard looked too empty. The little chicks were too small. It would be good to bring back a few piglets to raise too. Li Shu didn't take care about owning baby animals. But, whatever his wife liked, he was willing to buy them for her. At first, Li Hua was worried about how to feed the piglets if they brought them back. It was already difficult enough to feed the members of his family. But, looking at Li Man's anxiously waiting gaze, he clenched his jaw and purchased 2 piglets. Why 2 piglets instead of 1? It was because Li Man said that piglets had feelings too. If they only bought one, it would feel lonely. If there were two piglets, they would each have a companion. This would be beneficial for their growth. On the way back from this rewarding journey, Li Man's heart was overfilling with happiness, and her footsteps were once again light. Even after going up and down 2 mountains, she didn't need to rest on Li Shu's cart, which made Li Shu feel disappointed. They arrived at home around dusk. Li Yin was over at another family's house to do work, so he would be eating dinner with that family instead. Li Mo was the only person left at home. When they came back, he was chopping firewood. Big Black was quietly lying down near his master's feet and keeping him company. As soon as Big Black heard a sound from the entrance, he sat up and headed over there with a wagging tail to welcome everyone home. Li Man was scared of Big Black. In a flash, she hid behind Li Hua. Li Mo's expression sunk. As he walked over, he angrily yelled, "Big Black, come back!" Li Shu pushed the cart to a corner, looked at the large pile of firewood, and asked, "Oldest brother, why are you chopping firewood again? Didn't you already chop firewood yesterday?" "I'm just stacking it here after I chop them up. It'll be convenient to have firewood ready to use." As Li Mo answered his question, he stepped forward to take the rice from the cart and put it away. Actually, in a couple of days, he had to go into the mountains to hunt again. He didn't know when he would return, so he wanted to prepare extra firewood before he left. Li Shu didn't ask any more questions. He and Li Mo each carried a big bag of rice into the kitchen while Li Hua carried in a bag of flour. After patiently waiting for them to carry everything into the kitchen, Li Man untied the piglets that had been tied to corners of the cart. To her surprise, as soon as the piglets were untied, they jumped out of her arms and ran off. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 26. Chapter 26, Feeling Annoyed. Shocked, Li Man yelled out, "Ah, the piglets!" She hurriedly chased after them. Hearing her scream, Li Mo was the first one that rushed outside and saw Li Man chasing after the two piglets in the courtyard with her short legs. His eyes suddenly felt like twitching as he resisted the urge to laugh. Li Shu, Li Hua, and Little Five hurriedly came outside too and saw Li Man running around in circles as she chased after the two piglets. "Why are you just standing there? Hurry and help me catch them." Li Man's legs already felt tired from her sprinting, but these people were just blankly standing around and didn't even think to help her. She was so angry that she almost wanted to give up and just let the little piglets run away. Li Hua hurriedly walked over to stop her, but Li Mo was one step faster than him. In a few strides, Li Mo reached Li Man and grabbed her with one hand to stop her. "Stop chasing them. Why did you grab me? Go grab them." Li Man was gasping for breath. As she was pointing at the piglets in front of them, she noticed that they had stopped by a corner and were also huffing to catch their breath. Li Shu led Little Five to that corner and picked up the two piglets. What made Li Man want to smash herself against the wall the most was that the two piglets were being extremely docile in Li Shu's arms. Li Hua walked over and wrote on the ground, "The more you chase after them, the more they'll get scared and continue running." Li Man's eyelids twitched. If they hadn't run, would she have chased after them? They didn't know if her small, flushed face was from being angry or from being tired, but it looked very charming to them. Li Mo felt as if his eyes had been pricked again. He hastily released her hand and said, "All right, let's go inside and eat dinner." He turned around and headed towards the kitchen. Li Man scampered after him. Looking at her back figure, Li Hua finally couldn't stop his lips from smiling. They had purchased and bought back the piglets, but would she really be able to raise them? Li Mo had made dinner tonight. It was a pot of congee and a plate of unidentifiable stir-fry. Li Mo's brothers knew that he didn't know how to cook. It was already an unprecedented accomplishment that he had cooked a pot of congee without burning it. As for the fact that this congee was watery enough to be soup, that wasn't worth commenting on. Fortunately, they still had 3 steamed bun and a couple of millet pancakes that hadn't been eaten yet. After warming up the leftovers from their lunch, they had enough for a meal. Unfortunately, Li Man didn't know better and know that blackened mess was pickled vegetables. She foolishly picked some up to eat with her chopsticks. Right after putting the food into her mouth, the taste was so awful that she almost spat it out. But, worried that she would hurt Li Mo's feelings, she pressed her lips together and swallowed the food down. Drink some congee. Seeing her expression, Li Hua brought over a bowl of congee. Li Man didn't even think twice before pouring the watery congee down her throat. After desperately drinking an entire bowl of watery congee, the awful taste was finally washed away. Concerned, Li Hua asked, "Are you feeling a bit better now?" Li Man put down the bowl and let out a long, comfortable sigh. Seeing this, Li Shu wickedly curved his lips into a smile. "Oldest brother, why did you think to make dinner tonight? Why didn't you wait until we had come back? You guys had a long, tiring day, so I wanted to have dinner ready for you guys," Li Mo slowly replied with a calm expression. But, he secretly felt annoyed with himself. He had tried to cook a few batches of the stir-fry and picked the best one, but it still ended up tasting awful. He was so useless. He stood up, picked up Li Man's empty bowl, walked to the kitchen range, and tried his best to scoop out the part of the congee that was thicker.